Kara Voss woke to the sharp scent of damp earth and the distant howl of something unnatural. A metallic taste clung to her tongue, the residual effect of the stasis field that had kept her unconscious. As her vision adjusted, the dense jungle around her pulsed with eerie bioluminescence, casting sickly green glows against the gnarled trees. She inhaled deeply, ignoring the dull ache in her ribs. This wasn't Earth. It wasn't even human territory. The realization settled like a stone in her gut. She had been taken. Her fingers twitched against the rough ground, searching for anything useful. Cold metal brushed against her wrist. Restraints. A low beep from her forearm confirmed a tracking device, seamlessly embedded just beneath her skin. She exhaled through her nose, forcing herself to stay calm. Panic was a predator's scent, and she could already feel unseen eyes watching. Then the voice came. Lesser species, welcome to the arena. A guttural tone echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. Your struggle begins now. A flickering hologram materialized above her, a towering alien figure clad in dark, ceremonial armor. Its reptilian features were sharp, cruel, its golden eyes gleaming with amusement. You are the latest selection for the grand hunt, the creature continued. Your existence now serves only as entertainment. Run, fight, die. Your fate amuses us. Kara's jaw tightened. She had heard of them, the Galactic Hunters. Sadistic warriors who collected beings from across the stars, releasing them onto death worlds for sport. The thought made her stomach churn, but fear would do nothing for her now. A countdown blinked in the corner of her vision. 10 minutes. A generous head start. She flexed her wrists, testing the restraints. Basic energy bindings, strong but crude. Kneeling slightly, she tensed her muscles, preparing. One shot. That's all she'd get. She snapped her arms forward, wrenching against the bindings with a controlled burst of strength. The field flickered, disrupted by the sudden force, and then it died. Kara didn't hesitate. She ripped the device from her wrist, ignoring the sting of torn flesh. Blood welled, but she was free. The countdown hit 6 minutes. She forced herself onto her feet, instincts screaming at her to move. The jungle stretched before her, thick and humid, filled with unseen dangers. But she was a soldier. No, she was more than that. She had been trained to survive in the worst conditions imaginable. And she wasn't about to die for their amusement. The first sign of pursuit came in the form of a low, guttural snarl. A shadow flickered between the trees, just beyond the glow of alien fungi. Kara stilled, heart steady, listening. The creature was massive, judging by the weight of its movements, but cautious. Smart enough to test her before striking. She turned slowly, scanning the terrain. A broken tree limb jutted from the underbrush, a weapon, crude but effective. She grabbed it, rolling her grip to test the balance. It would do. Then it lunged. A reptilian brute, easily twice her size, its obsidian hide gleaming under the dim light. Its maw split into a jagged grin, thick claws flexing in anticipation. Kara didn't run. She stepped into the attack. The branch arced, a sharp whistle cutting through the air before it cracked against the side of the hunter's skull. It staggered, a guttural snarl escaping its throat. She didn't give it time to recover. Her boot drove into its knee joint, forcing it down. Another strike, this time to the throat. The creature choked, gurgling as it collapsed. She wrenched a blade from its belt. Heavy. Curved. Perfect. The creature's golden eyes flickered with something almost like realization. A hunt should have been easy. It had expected prey. Instead, it had found something else entirely. Kara wiped the blood from her arm and took its weapon. The hunt had begun. The jungle thickened as she moved, the luminescent plants pulsing with an unsettling rhythm. She crouched low, keeping to the shadows, her mind analyzing every angle of the terrain. Survival wasn't enough. She needed to think ahead, to anticipate her hunter's next move. A soft beep drew her attention. The device on her wrist was still transmitting. They were tracking her. Her lips pressed into a thin line. If she wanted to change the game, she needed to disappear. She found a shallow stream, its waters dark and slow-moving. Without hesitation, She plunged her arm into the cold current, gritting her teeth against the pain as she pried the tracker loose. Blood swirled into the water as she tossed the device downstream, sending a false signal. It wouldn't fool them for long, but it would buy her time. Time she would use wisely. The sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through her veins. More were coming. 2, maybe 3. Their movements were disciplined, methodical. These weren't brutes like the first one. These were soldiers. She adjusted her grip on the stolen blade and sank lower into the foliage, waiting. A figure emerged through the underbrush, armored and alert, its rifle scanning the area where her tracker had last transmitted. Behind it, another moved in tandem, covering the flank. Professional. Efficient. But they weren't hunting an animal. Kara moved fast, her body a blur in the darkness. The first alien barely registered the attack before her blade drove deep into the exposed seam between its armor plates. A wet gasp, a shudder, and then silence. The second turned, weapon raising, too slow. She was already on him, twisting the rifle from his grasp, driving the butt of the weapon into his throat. He gurgled, collapsing. Before he could recover, she pressed the blade to his neck. "Tell me how many are left." Her voice was ice. The alien's breath rasped, defiance flickering in his eyes. She pressed harder. "I won't ask twice." A strained chuckle. "You think you can?" The blade slit his throat before he could finish. She didn't have time for games. Kara wiped the weapon clean and exhaled. 2 down. Many more to go. The overseers were watching, no doubt. She could almost hear their laughter turning into something else, something uncertain. Good. Let them wonder. She retrieved a rifle from the fallen hunter, inspecting its alien craftsmanship. Sleek, deadly. She slung it over her shoulder, glancing once more at the corpses. The message was clear. She wasn't their prey. She was the predator now. The scent of blood lingered in the humid air, mingling with the damp, earthy rot of the jungle floor. Kara crouched over the bodies of the 2 fallen hunters, her muscles taut, senses stretched to their limit. The rifle in her hands was heavier than she preferred, but it was a weapon, and right now, weapons were survival. She had no time to waste. The others would come soon, drawn by the sudden silence of their comrades. She needed to move, but not blindly. Not like prey. She was done running. The jungle whispered around her, leaves shifting in the unnatural breeze stirred by unseen drones high above. They were still watching, analyzing, adjusting their expectations. She could almost hear the discussions unfolding aboard the distant ship orbiting the planet, the overseers conferring in hushed, uncertain tones. This one is different. She allowed herself the smallest smirk. They were right. Stripping one of the fallen hunters of his sidearm, she checked its charge. 3/4 full. Not ideal, but sufficient. Their gear was built for efficiency, not flair. Sleek plasma weaponry designed to drop prey swiftly. But she wasn't prey, and she wouldn't be dropped. A sharp click echoed from deeper in the jungle. A deliberate sound, purposeful. Someone testing the silence. They were closing in. She ghosted into the underbrush, moving low, her steps light against the loamy ground. The terrain was shifting, less dense jungle, more twisted, alien ruins jutting from the earth like the bones of some long-dead beast. Strange symbols adorned the stone, worn down by time, but she wasn't here to decipher history. She was here to kill. And they were coming. Through a break in the foliage, she spotted movement. 3 figures, advancing in a staggered formation, rifles raised. They were more disciplined than the others, their eyes sweeping the shadows with trained precision. She had seconds to act. Gripping the stolen rifle, she flicked off the safety and adjusted her stance. A clean shot to the lead hunter's throat sent him collapsing before he could make a sound. The second flinched, pivoting toward the flash of gunfire, too slow. A burst of plasma took him through the chest, the impact sending him sprawling. The third was fast. Faster than she expected. He dove for cover, his own rifle spitting lethal blue streaks through the trees. Kara rolled sideways, ducking behind the curve of a fallen pillar, plasma scorching the stone where her head had been a second earlier. A standoff. But she had something he didn't. Patience. The hunter's breathing was sharp, his armor scraping stone as he shifted, recalibrating. He thought he had time. He thought he could outlast her. Kara let the silence stretch. A minute. Then 2. She knew his type. Soldiers like him had a breaking point, a moment where their nerves twitched, where the need to act overrode caution. When it came, she was ready. The instant his foot shifted, she swung around, squeezing the trigger. His weapon fired in the same breath, searing past her shoulder, close enough that the heat stung. But her shot hit home, direct through the visor. He crumpled without a sound. She exhaled, chest rising and falling in measured rhythm. 3 more down. But she needed more than just numbers. She needed to unnerve them. Stripping the corpses of their communicators, she toggled the frequency, static hissing before stabilizing into a garbled alien tongue. She didn't need to understand the words to recognize the urgency. They were losing control of the hunt. Good. Pressing the transmitter to her lips, she let silence stretch for a beat, then spoke. Your men are dead. The line crackled, someone responding in harsh, clipped tones. Kara smiled coldly. Send more. I could use the exercise. Then she crushed the device beneath her boot. She didn't stay to hear the response. Let them wonder. Let them hesitate. Let them understand what real fear felt like. The ruins stretched deeper into the jungle, their jagged stone structures forming a natural fortress. If she played this right, it could be the perfect battleground. She moved swiftly, securing higher ground along a broken ledge, scanning the horizon. The night was deepening, the jungle alive with sounds both familiar and alien. She could feel the shift in the air, the way the hunters moved now, cautious, uncertain. They were learning. A flicker of movement in the distance caught her attention. Reinforcements. Heavily armed, moving with precision. They were adjusting their strategy, sending smarter, more experienced soldiers. And leading them was something new. A figure taller than the others, clad in segmented armor that shimmered with a predatory sheen. Even from here, Kara could tell, this one wasn't just another grunt. This was a hunter who had seen real war. Her grip on the rifle tightened. He raised a hand, signaling the others to spread out. His head tilted slightly, as if sensing her presence. Even from the distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. A challenge. She welcomed it. She wouldn't run. Not anymore. She was done playing their game. Now, they would play hers. Kara steadied her breathing, her pulse a measured drumbeat beneath her skin. The jungle around her had gone still, the distant hum of nocturnal creatures drowned beneath an oppressive silence. The hunt had shifted. No longer a mindless chase, no longer an arrogant display of power. They had sent their best now, and Kara knew why. The overseers were watching, and they needed to regain control of their game. But Kara had taken that control the moment she stopped running. She adjusted her grip on the stolen rifle, pressing her back against the rough stone of the ruins' ledge. Below, the squad of reinforcements moved with lethal precision, their formation disciplined, their weapons primed. The commander at the front stood apart, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade through flesh. Even without the advantage of height, she could tell, he was built for war. His armor bore no insignia, only deep scars from past battles. His movements were deliberate, patient. A predator who understood another predator. Kara didn't have time to admire the irony. She shifted, angling her rifle toward the nearest soldier in the formation. A clean shot would drop him, but a clean shot wasn't what she needed. She needed disruption. Her finger squeezed the trigger. Plasma streaked through the air, striking the ground just behind the first hunter. The explosion of dirt and stone sent the formation into a flurry of movement, weapons rising, bodies shifting into defensive positions. Confusion was a weapon, and she wielded it with precision. A second shot clipped another soldier's shoulder, sending him staggering into his nearest ally. They weren't panicking, but they were reacting, and that was enough. Then, he moved. The commander broke from the formation with terrifying speed, his powerful legs carrying him across the ruins in seconds. Kara barely had time to roll before his rifle spat searing plasma where she had been crouched moments before. He had seen through her strategy instantly, understood the distraction for what it was. Smart. She hit the ground running, ducking behind a collapsed pillar as another shot whined past her ear. He was fast, too fast for drawn-out engagements. She had to close the gap. Holstering the rifle, she yanked the curved blade from her belt, the weight of it a comfort in her palm. Footsteps pounded against stone, closing in. He was coming. She twisted, launching herself from cover just as he rounded the corner. Their weapons clashed, plasma dagger against alien steel. Sparks flared between them as she met his attack head-on, muscles straining against his unnatural strength. He pressed forward, the weight of him forcing her back, boots skidding against the uneven stone. His golden eyes gleamed behind his visor, studying her, calculating. Then he smiled. The shift in his grip was subtle, but she caught it. The dagger in his other hand arced toward her ribs, a killing stroke meant to end this quickly. Kara twisted sharply, redirecting his own force against him. His blade missed its mark, carving through the air inches from her side. She struck back, driving the pommel of her weapon into his wrist. A sharp crack, a grunt of pain. His grip faltered. She didn't hesitate. Spinning, she wrenched the dagger from his weakened grasp and buried it deep in his shoulder. He roared, the sound more rage than pain, and lashed out with his other arm. The impact sent her sprawling, her back slamming against the stone. Stars exploded in her vision, but she forced herself up, gasping through the burning ache in her ribs. He stood over her now, wounded but undeterred. Blood, thick and dark, seeped from his shoulder, but he hardly seemed to notice. "Impressive," he said, his voice a low rumble, laced with something almost like approval. Kara spat blood onto the ground. "You haven't seen anything yet." He lunged. She rolled, barely avoiding the strike, but he was faster this time, his foot slamming into her side before she could recover. Pain splintered through her ribs as she hit the ground again, her breath tearing from her lungs. He didn't give her time to rise. In a blink, he was on top of her, one knee pressing against her chest, the plasma dagger hovering just beneath her throat. His grip was steady, his expression unreadable. For the first time since the hunt began, Kara felt the weight of finality settle over her. But fear never came. Her gaze locked onto his, her mind already calculating, already searching for the opening she needed. He was close now. Too close. And close was a mistake. With a sharp jerk, she slammed her forehead against his visor. The impact cracked the reinforced glass, and for the briefest second, he flinched. It was all she needed. Her hands shot up, twisting his wrist with brutal precision. The plasma dagger clattered to the ground, and before he could react, she drove her knee into his side, forcing him off balance. Momentum carried her forward. She straddled him now, pressing his own blade against the vulnerable seam in his armor. His chest rose and fell beneath her, his golden eyes watching her with something unreadable. Recognition. "Do it," he growled. She hesitated. Not out of mercy, not out of doubt, but because she saw something in his gaze that she hadn't seen in any of the others. Respect. For the first time, she wasn't just a prize in their twisted game. She was a contender. Her grip on the blade tightened. Then, she heard it. A distant hum, rising in pitch, a sound she recognized instantly. The drones. The overseers had seen enough. The game was over. Her head snapped upward just as the sky split with light. The distant warship, the one she knew had been circling like a vulture since the moment she woke up on this planet, had begun its descent. They weren't coming to finish her. They were coming to claim her. A low, resonant hum filled the air, rippling across the ruins like the tremors of an oncoming storm. Kara's pulse slowed, her grip tightening on the hilt of the alien dagger still pressed against the commander's throat. His golden eyes flicked past her, up toward the sky, where the warship descended through the thick clouds, its metallic hull reflecting the eerie glow of the jungle below. The hunt was over. Kara knew what came next. They wouldn't let her leave. Not after this. The commander exhaled sharply beneath her, the rise and fall of his chest controlled despite the situation. He didn't fight, didn't struggle. His body was a machine of war, disciplined to the core, yet now he lay still beneath his enemy, the woman who had turned their game into something else entirely. "Interesting," he murmured, his voice steady despite the blade at his throat. Kara didn't respond. She was watching the warship. The side panels had begun to shift, releasing a wave of smaller drones that descended like mechanical vultures, scanning the battlefield. The overseers wouldn't be pleased with how this had unfolded. Their entertainment had spiraled into something unpredictable, and they despised the unpredictable. The jungle trembled as the ship's landing thrusters roared, flattening foliage, sending dust and debris into the air. The hunt was never meant to end with her standing. She was supposed to be broken, barely breathing, begging for mercy as they decided whether she was worth keeping alive for future sport. Instead, she had gutted their best warriors. She had bested their champion. She had proven them wrong. A deep, metallic groan echoed from the warship's underbelly as a massive ramp extended toward the ground. The figures that emerged weren't soldiers. They didn't need to be. The overseers were beyond physical combat, their power rooted in control, in unseen forces that shaped the fates of thousands. Kara rose slowly, her body a map of bruises and blood, but her posture unbroken. She stepped back from the commander, allowing him space to rise. He did so without hesitation, moving with the deliberate grace of a warrior acknowledging an opponent rather than an enemy. The overseers approached, their elongated forms draped in shimmering, iridescent robes that seemed to shift colors with each step. Their faces remained obscured behind smooth, featureless masks, but Kara could feel their eyes on her, cold and calculating. "You were meant to die," one of them said, its voice a whisper and a command all at once. Kara rolled her shoulders, ignoring the ache radiating from her ribs. "I don't follow orders well." A pause. The weight of their scrutiny pressed down on her, heavier than any battlefield she had ever known. The commander stepped forward then, his body positioned not as a subordinate, but as something else, something she couldn't quite define. He looked at the overseers, then at her. "She is not prey," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "She is a warrior." The silence that followed was suffocating. The overseers were not accustomed to being defied, especially not by one of their own. The tension between them crackled like static in the air. Kara watched, waiting. She could feel it, the shift, the unseen battle playing out in the depths of whatever consciousness governed these beings. Then, one of them turned slightly, addressing her directly. "You have disrupted the balance of the hunt," it intoned. "This is unacceptable." Kara tilted her head. "You wanted a show," she said, her voice dry. "You got one." Another pause. Another shift in the unseen current. The overseers did not move, but she could sense their unease, their uncertainty. This was new territory for them. They had not expected a human to rise beyond their control. The commander took another step forward. "She has earned her place," he said. "To discard her would be wasteful." Kara frowned, glancing at him. There was something in his tone, something calculated. He wasn't just trying to save her life. He was making a move within their hierarchy. The overseers considered this, their heads tilting in unison. Then, after a long, weighted silence, one of them spoke. "Very well," it said. "She will not be discarded." Kara exhaled, though she made sure not to show relief. That didn't mean she was safe. The overseer's mask turned toward her once more. "You will fight again," it continued. "Not as prey. Not as entertainment. But as something greater." Kara's jaw clenched. She wasn't sure she liked the sound of that. "You misunderstand," the commander said smoothly, his gaze still fixed on the overseers. "She will not fight because you command it. She will fight because she chooses to." Another ripple of tension. Kara remained silent, watching the way the overseers subtly shifted, the way their calculations seemed to rearrange themselves in real time. She didn't trust them, not for a second, but she understood leverage when she saw it. And somehow, she had gained it. The overseers finally moved, their decision reached. "Then let her choose," one of them said. And let the galaxy see what becomes of the hunter who refused to be hunted. The warship's ramp retracted, the drones dispersing into the sky once more. The jungle settled in their absence, though the air remained charged with something new, something different. The commander turned to her, his golden eyes studying her with a quiet intensity. "You could leave," he said, his voice measured. "Return to your kind. Forget this place." Kara met his gaze, something cold and sharp settling in her chest. "Could I?" she asked. She knew the answer before he spoke.
No.
She had changed something here, broken something they thought unbreakable. The overseers would never forget her. The galaxy would never forget her. She wasn't just another victim of the hunt. She was the one who turned the hunt into something else entirely. And legends, once born, could never truly die.